Well, Celeste, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks, Arlena. I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm holding up a copy of your book. I see it, you have it in your background too. How good did it feel to hold your book in your hands for the first time?
It felt really surreal. I've been working on this book for years now, and it was funny because the copies of the book had been mailed to me, but I hadn't gotten them. And like 1 week passed, then 2 weeks passed, and all these other people are getting it and they are sending me pictures and they're saying, "It's so exciting. How does it feel?" And I still haven't gotten it yet. And finally, 3 weeks later, I reach out to my publisher and I'm like, "Can you check the tracking?" And they had sent it to the wrong address. So it got sent back to them. So they had to resend it. So I got the book about a week before the rest of the world got it. And but it's exciting to finally have it.
That must have been
Absolutely.
that must have been a little anxiety producing, I would
I've
imagine.
been checking the door every single day, like, where
Uh,
is it?
Where is my book? Well, congratulations on doing it. I'm in the process of publishing myself. It's an incredible feat what you've accomplished. And the subject matter. So the title of the book, it's not about the wine, the loaded truth behind mommy wine culture. And I gotta say, like this conversation never gets old for me because you know, especially with I was gonna say with the Barbie movie out, and
Mhm.
it's so eloquently talked about the struggles that women have. Don't be too fat, don't be too thin, you can't be angry, you can't be horny, you can't be hungry. It's like all this don't be mean, have a voice, but don't have a voice. It was like, oh my God, I'm so confused already.
Absolutely.
But here, have a glass of wine.
Right. That'll fix your problems.
That'll do it.
And I feel
That'll
like
do
motherhood, I mean, you take it up a whole nother level. Like, get your body back, be a good
it.
mom,
Ooh,
work like you don't have kids, and be at home like you don't work. I mean, I feel like motherhood has a whole different level of stressors put on us where we have to be this superhero woman that does it all and makes it look easy and comes home to this perfectly Pinterest looking house, social media worthy, and just make it look seamless and easy. Like this is just the most natural thing in the world when it doesn't feel anything like that. It feels
no.
extremely challenging, extremely draining, exhausting every given moment, wondering if you're screwing up your kids in some way. It's just never ending. So yeah, I really
Yeah.
felt that monologue hard
Yeah.
in the message in Barbie. And I really thought that for mothers, we could absolutely feed off those frustrations.
Yeah, that's like a gasoline on a fire, and let's add some motherhood to this. But
Hmm.
so let's talk about what the mommy wine culture is. I want to talk about like what it is and the challenges behind it, and we'll obviously get to your story and some of the solutions. But um, oh, you know what? I almost forgot. I like to play this little game called the lightning round where we sort of front load the episode with some resources. So when you first started your recovery journey, was there a book that helped you in the beginning?
The first book I ever read in recovery was The Sober Diaries.
Oh yeah, Claire Pooley.
Yes.
Yeah, I had
And
her on. She's awesome.
that was fabulous. And that was not only the first book I read in recovery, but the first book that made me feel like, okay, maybe somebody else gets this. Maybe I'm
Yeah.
not alone.
Wow. That's really just listen, I am not alone and somebody else is living my, life of quiet desperation, so to speak.
Mhm.
That must have been so validating. Um, do you have a go-to quote or mantra that you live by?
I do. And this is the quote that really helped me get through my first year of sobriety or recovery. And it was from the I Am Sober app. Every morning at 10 a.m., my phone dings from that app and it gives me like a little quote to live by. And one of the early quotes was, "You didn't come this far only to come this far." And that was really empowering to me in early sobriety, but even now, to think, I don't have to ever do those first 3 weeks again. I don't ever have to do those first 3 months again. I can keep going. I never have to go back to day one if I keep going this journey. And that really invigorated me because I didn't ever want to go back to day one. Those were the worst days of my life. So if
Yeah.
I can just keep going this direction, I didn't come this far just to stop now.
Right. Oh, that's beautiful. That is really inspiring. Do you have a regular self-care practice? And that can be like a morning routine, a weekly one, or I've had some people talk about like annual retreats they go on. What does that look like for you, your ongoing care?
I mean, it looks a little bit different every day, but I do try to train for a marathon once a year. Yeah.
Well,
So
bless your heart.
I know. So, because running really is part of my self-care routine.
Yeah.
So having a goal to work towards is big for me. So every
Yeah.
fall, uh, and I'm working towards my fifth marathon right now. And it'll be at the end of October, but it keeps me really focused and grounded on the goal at hand. So it helps get me up early mornings on Saturday. It helps motivate me to train. And it also helps me push my limits in a way that I would never otherwise do. And when I'm not training for the marathon, that takes about 3 months of my year. When I'm not training for the marathon, I'm either just doing regular simple runs in the neighborhood, or I'm training for a 10K or a half somewhere else, or I just go to Orange Theory during the week. So exercise is a really important part of how I take care of me now.
That's awesome. Do you have like a spiritual practice?
I tr- I shake it up a little bit, but meditation is important to me,
Oh,
and journaling, and being in nature. These are all ways I find spirituality now. I This has changed, over time. I think even since I quit drinking, my spirituality has absolutely changed. And I used to go to church and be in church groups and whatnot. And I have felt that shift since I quit drinking, that now I find myself more grounded when I'm in nature, more grounded when I am focusing inward.
mm,
And the way I see it is that's when I feel closest to a higher power, not at church. And so that's really changed for me.
yeah. It's an ongoing evolution, I think, for everyone. If you're conscious of it and you're paying attention, I think that's normal. Yeah. I think it's inevitable.
Mm.
It's
I
always
think it's a
evolving.
good thing. I don't think it's a bad
Yeah.
thing at all.
No.
I'm really grateful that I have this new relationship with my higher power than I ever did in the past.
Yeah. What I know it's so hard to define, but what are some of the ideas that you have around your higher power now? Like what is it to you?
Well, it's nature. It's a connection to nature. It's a connection to energy I can't
Mhm.
see, but I can feel. Laura McCowan calls it the diamond at the center of our chest. And I love that analogy. I think that's a beautiful way to look at it, or to think of it as kind of a golden orb that sits within me and kind
Mhm.
of is my energy source.
Mhm.
So I see it as different things, but I also see it when I'm outside and I see something beautiful that nobody else got to see. I was
Uh,
alone in the presence of it, and I got to experience something uh, that is indescribable. And it's moments
yeah.
like that where I feel connected to this higher power, where I feel at one and at peace with what's around me and the energy around me, and kind of the magic uh, that is around us all the time. But most of the time, and certainly when I was drinking, I wasn't paying attention.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like those are like the dark years where we're kind of asleep and
Mhm.
no, that's really beautiful. Let's jump back a little bit. I want to talk a little bit about like what mommy wine culture is, because I mean, I think at face value, it's kind of obvious, it's the you see it at stores, it's on mugs and tea towels and t-shirts, and I mean, it's everywhere, and it's always done in jest, but like, what is it? Tell me what it means to you.
I define it as the social narrative that playfully jokes or implies that moms need alcohol to cope with parenting or cope with raising their children. So I think, that's the specific definition of how I see it. I do not see mommy wine culture as someone who just happens to be a mother enjoying a glass of wine. I would not define that as mommy wine culture. I really believe it's making this correlation or connection between mothers or parents and this need for alcohol.
Yeah.
That's
I was at a grocery store and it was, back to school, right? And there was
Mhm.
a wine display, and above the wine display was in like notebook, like ruled college ruled paper that said back to school supplies over a bunch of wine. And I was like, for fuck's sake.
That was such a heavy message when the pandemic hit. Too, at grocery stores, the signage telling parents to get their homeschooling supplies here, directing them right to the wine aisle. I mean, the pandemic was such a perfect example of how societally, when parents are under supported, instead of getting support, we joke or laugh or we suggest alcohol, that's
Yeah.
the fix. And I think it's an easy way to respond or to make light of what is much bigger issues at play.
It's a much bigger issue. Tell me how, in your book, you talk about falling into the alcohol trap. Can you just kind of talk a little bit about how you kind of fell into mommy wine culture and the effect that it had on you as a mom and as a woman?
I always was a partier and a drinker, and I socialized with alcohol like most people. Something shifted with the way I drank when I became a mom, and it felt less like I was doing it to have fun and more like I was doing it to function or to cope, certainly to self-medicate.
Hmm.
And there was kind of this desperation and need that came to me in motherhood where it just felt like I was going through the motions. I was faking it till I make it, just really a heavy imposter syndrome, constantly being afraid people would call me out, that they will see that I'm such a bad mom. And uh and then, the gig is up. But I used alcohol to fight back a lot of that anxiety and the fear and worry that came with wondering if people would see me as the fraud I felt like. Like, I didn't
Hmm.
feel like I was good at this. I felt like I was failing in every way. I saw everyone around me and on social media portray motherhood as deeply satisfying, the most beautiful moments of their life, and so fulfilling. And there were moments that were beautiful, but for the most part, I was petrified and exhausted and miserable and uncomfortable in my body and constantly worrying about this baby and feeling like I had no idea what I was doing. So alcohol kind of toned that voice down and softened it and made me feel a little relaxed in what is otherwise a very exhausting, draining day. And it really did feel like it was a coping strategy to get through the day. And it felt like a reward for a really hard day. And that shifted so much with motherhood. I feel like it transitioned from want to need when it got to that point. Because I was drinking for a different reason. Yeah. And that's really where, the my drinking hit kind of this problematic place where I started to need more to feel the same effects. But I knew I was drinking in a way that would be alarming for my husband or my loved ones to know. So I started to hide it a little. I would kind of sneak pours when people weren't looking. I would hide empties so people didn't know. I would, all these exhausting things that just take up so much time and energy. But like if I emptied out a bottle that was supposed to be safe for a special occasion, I go to the store, get the replacement, and try to put it back like nothing had ever happened. And I started to expend a lot of energy trying to clean up after myself or hide uh, my actions in a way that I think in the back of my head, I knew was big red flags. But I also kept trying to excuse it with mommy needs wine, this message, like, this is all I've got. I
Oh,
literally,
yeah.
everything else feels like it had been taken from me. My free time, my independence, my life the way it used to be. It felt like it was all being taken from me. And this is all I had at the end of the day. And so I kind of clung to it, like, you can't take this from me too. And it
Yeah.
was very much a feeling of desperation, but also a feeling of I've got nothing else. So I'm just going to hold on to this, uh, like my life depends on it.
That's such a like sad and lonely place. Like nobody talks about how hard it is to be a mom in the beginning. You always see like the social media is terrible, right? You just see all the pictures of the beautiful babies and the Instagram perfect homes and everything looks. And meanwhile, it's like the baby's been crying for 2 hours. I'm exhausted. I didn't sleep, and this little fucker is gonna suck up the rest of my day. It's like
Yeah. I mean, and
it's yeah.
breastfeeding is like the most depleting thing. I mean,
Yeah.
you're physically being drained.
Yes.
And it's so like even your body isn't your own anymore. It just felt like anything that could be taken from me was taken from me.
Yeah.
And I didn't feel this satisfaction or fulfillment that I thought I should be feeling because
Mm,
that's all I ever heard anyone express. So my assumption was I'm doing it wrong and I'm just a really bad
okay.
mom.
That's what I heard you saying about they will see I'm a bad mom. What made you think that you're a bad mom? You just were not enjoying the process?
Well, I'll tell you exactly why. It's because my firstborn had colic. And so
Oh,
he screamed just day and night, and soothing him was so hard. And I didn't know that, in the beginning, all I knew was I'm his mom. I'm supposed to be able to pick up on his cues. Everyone says, as a mom, trust your mommy instincts. Mommy instincts are real. Well, I've tried everything. I tried everything in the baby books. Nothing's working. He's always crying. He's always upset. It was really stressful to hear.
oh yeah.
And it was just 24/7.
Oof.
So to have that and to feel like such a horrible mom who can't even soothe her own baby, it
Mm,
just felt like I had failed from day one.
that's brutal, man. I remember times when my older boy would cry. There were times when I had to put him in a safe place and go sit outside and cry
Mm-hmm.
because it is just grinding on your soul because here's this little person that you love so much.
Yeah.
And there, I don't know, it was like the most torturous thing. And he didn't have colic.
Yeah.
So I
I mean,
can't
it
even
is
imagine.
torture.
It's torture. Yeah.
Yeah. And then to hear people who come to visit say, well, have you tried this? Or have you tried this? Or you're not swaddling him properly. It's like all these things coming at you as I mean, they're trying to be helpful, but inside, like I see myself getting smaller and smaller and smaller.
Oh, brutal.
And it really made me want to isolate more,
Yeah.
because I didn't want people to see this mom who can't even watch her own child and take care of her own child.
Yeah. Okay, that makes perfect sense. I mean, the nightmare that you must have endured is brutal, and then enter alcohol and it's a relief. I mean, that's what it is for a lot of us, is the
Yeah,
relief from emotional distress. And so things aren't working and you're like, I have to give this up. How that must have been so not only terrifying, but sad. Like, did you go through a grieving period of giving up this thing that had been your solution?
I did. The best way I can describe it is I felt like I had lost a seat at the adult table and I was now doomed to the kids' table for the rest of my life. Like it felt like I was going to have to live with deprivation forever.
Mm.
And everyone else gets to enjoy themselves and I get to just white knuckle the rest of my life. That's how it genuinely felt when I quit drinking the first several months.
Mhm.
Um, and I started the whole process just, being convinced that I have to quit, but not really knowing what else to do. I didn't
Oh,
go to meetings, I didn't read books, I didn't know anybody else who was sober. So I just kept this kind of quiet and ashamed, lots of shame,
yeah.
and was like, this is just going to be my thing. And over time, as I started to read the books, as I started to meet other people who didn't drink, and then as I started to connect with communities,
Hmm.
is really when kind of the abundance that comes with recovery
Yeah.
started to bloom.
Yeah.
And, I look back now and I just wish I gave myself that gift sooner. I mean, I didn't know, but I wish I knew.
Yeah. I was just gonna say, yeah, in all fairness to you, uh, there are way more options now than there used to be. And
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you a little bit. You did mention in your book, I know a lot of my listeners are 12 step oriented. They're going to be like, why didn't you go to 12 step? But, it's my understanding. I'll let you tell your story, but it's my understanding that you had a sort of negative experience with that. Can you talk a little bit about your dad, as you wrote about him in the book, and
Yeah.
maybe kind of what turned you off to 12 step?
My dad was a functioning alcoholic my whole childhood until he wasn't. When I was 15, he had a stroke and almost died. But he was permanently disabled, to the point where it was hard for him to talk. It was hard for him to walk. And his drinking really escalated even more so after that. And it was really hard because you couldn't tell if he was drunk or not because he always was stumbling. He was always slurring his speech. Now that after his stroke, so really, it just amplified uh, all of his disabilities. And uh, we, my mom made him go to AA, and in her effort to help him stop drinking, but he still drank while he went to AA, and um, it's not AA's fault, of course not. It's my dad wasn't, his heart wasn't there. He was just trying to appease people. But I grew up seeing my dad go to meetings, come home proudly holding chips, and all of us looking at him like, you're not sober.
Right.
You're fooling nobody.
Right.
And so it just made me so frustrated and angry, and to the place where when it was my realization that I had a drinking problem, that's just not where I wanted to go. I just still had so much resentment for my dad's journey
Yeah.
that I just wanted to do it differently. And my relationship with alcohol looked so significantly different than his anyway.
Mm.
He was always like a drink. He started drinking the minute the sun came up. And I had kind of these fool's rules around, I don't start drinking till 5. I don't drink every day. I had all these things that made me a safe drinker, even till I wasn't. But it felt like, how could my father's an alcoholic? How could I be the same label as him when my drinking looks so different. So it was a lot of stigma around that label too.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a tough hurdle to overcome for a lot of people. That's yeah. And so let's kind of transition a little bit to I know you started drinking really young. Can you talk about the experience that you had when you were 16 in Sweden?
Yeah, I went on an exchange through a peace organization to Sweden at 16, and I lived with a family in southern Sweden for a month, and it was so fun. I mean, it's
I
such
bet.
a wonderful time. Everyone there was so kind, and I got to live with this family who's just so accommodating and welcoming and lovely. And one night, me and the 16-year-old girl that from that family went to a party, and I had drinks before uh that trip to Sweden, but just like in bits and pieces, just little sips. But at this party, I drank a lot. And I remember having that first drink and being like, this is wonderful. Like my hands aren't shaky. I feel confident. I feel pretty. All these things that I was so um unconfident about as a teenage girl in my real life felt like it was melting away. And I felt like this badass 16-year-old girl that I've always wanted to be just showed up and presented herself. And I was like, if one drink can make me feel like this, what will two drinks feel like? And I have no idea how much I drank that night. All I remember French kissing one guy. Um, and then I remember uh, being in a shower with two or three girls holding me up. I was butt naked. They're all dressed and they're trying to sober me up. I think I had just vomited all over myself. And the girl from the exchange had to call her parents. Her parents had to come pick us up. We had ridden our bikes there, but I was too drunk to bike ride home. The parents had to come pick us up. And now I look back as a mother and I think this family put their lives on hold for me to come stay with them for a month. And that's how I repaid them. Like it still makes me so sad
Yeah.
that that was the experience that we all had to share because I did not know anything about, I mean, I knew my dad drank. I knew it was a problem, but I also knew everybody else drank and it wasn't a problem. So I didn't
Right.
understand why it would be a problem for me. And
Right.
I was just so ignorant to all of it. And for my family, it was such a secret. Like it was such a hush hush topic. You know, shush, your dad's an alcoholic. Don't tell anybody. I just didn't know what I was doing. So after that experience in Sweden, I really swore off alcohol for the rest of high school. And I did not try it again until college.
Yeah. Okay. So we fast forward. By the way, that sounds very familiar. That whole scene that you described. I'm like,
God.
oh, they say that I think Shakespeare said a tragedy plus time equals comedy because that's the kind of thing that we laugh about now, right? We're so
You
just
laugh
fun
because you can't cry,
because you
but
can't cry.
I can look back on it in a different way now as a mom and be like,
Yeah.
and just be mortified.
Yeah.
And I think I was embarrassed for a long time, but now I'm mortified because as a mother, I can only imagine the stress and strain I put on those poor parents who were just so
So that's
lovely.
interesting. Your experience hasn't been you said more mortified. You haven't had that place of compassion for your 16-year-old self that felt the need to do that.
I think I've forgiven myself in so many ways for what happened that night because I just didn't know any better.
Right. Yeah.
And I also am so grateful nobody was hurt.
Yeah.
I certainly put myself in a really horrible position in so many ways. So I'm glad that nothing horrific happened as a result. So I've had a lot of time to kind of sit and think about that side of it.
All right.
And to give myself grace. But
Yeah.
there's something about looking at it from the motherhood angle at this day and time with my kids about to start their tween era, and then I've got um just thinking about middle school and high school as a parent and
Yeah.
thinking, how would I have handled that, if I was in their shoes, and just how scary that probably was for them in a way
Yeah. I
that I
mean,
never considered before.
yeah, it's funny, the magnitude, when you consider the magnitude from the other perspective, it's a weight that can't be diminished.
Yeah.
So it's those trying experiences that sort of highlight, how things could have gone, but didn't. Yeah, I really appreciate that. So let's transition to you mentioned when we did our pre-chat interview, you said something that has really kind of stayed with me and haunted me in a way. You talked about spontaneous sobriety. And I was like, that is so interesting because I had an experience. My last drink was the day after my 25th birthday, and I had gotten so drunk and was so sick. And I was like, that's it. I'm never drinking again. And then proceeded to take a big bong hit. But that's another story. But I just knew in my soul that I would never take another drink of alcohol again. And I haven't. But I was on that marijuana maintenance program for a little while,
Sure.
but I was on other drugs. And it sounds like you were like clean and sober from a certain point on. What was that? Was there a night where you're like, I'm never drinking again?
Yeah, it was a day. It was Monday, just in December. We just had a weekend of holiday parties, and I went into work on a Monday morning, and I had a panic attack, and I was so scared that I was having a stroke like my dad. Um and I had all these thoughts in my head, like, what would life look like if, one, I died right here, right now? What would that look like for my family? Or two, I was permanently disabled like my dad. The entire trajectory of every single person in my family's life would change, and not for the better. And it made me, it scared me to death, to the point where I got home. I went to the ER thinking I was having a stroke. I wasn't. I was having a panic attack, but I got home that day and I didn't know anything. I did not know what my life was going to look like. I didn't know how I was going to cope here on out. All I knew was I could not drink anymore.
Mm.
I could not take that chance, not a second more. I was risking everything with the way I was drinking. And so I call it spontaneous sobriety. That day, that Monday that I quit drinking, I would have just called it scared to death.
Scared
Scared to
straight.
death sobriety.
Yeah.
But after researching and, being in recovery now for almost 6 years, now Annie Grace describes this kind of realization and this kind of hard stop, without exactly knowing what you're going to do, but knowing you're going to figure it out as you go, spontaneous sobriety. And I really love that, because that's exactly how I've done it. All
Yeah.
I knew that day on my day one was I have to stop. But I just figured it out as I went.
Mm.
And I started, I called those early months white knuckling.
Hmm.
I was able to lessen that grip over time and over education and over community,
Mm.
uh, to the place where, it took me almost a year to get here, but to actually reach a place where I was like, this is the best thing I could have ever done.
Oh yeah.
Where your heart kind of shifts from survival to embracing.
Yeah.
Like, this is such a gift for me, for my kids, for my partner. Like, my entire world just opened up
Yeah.
because of what I'm doing. And I never want to go back.
Well said. That is so beautiful. Yeah, it's not about deprivation anymore. I mean, sobriety is really just the beginning. It's just the
Exactly.
beginning.
That's just
Yeah.
the first step.
You mentioned, I've heard you talk about, you know, not regretting that first year of not getting support or help sooner. Like looking back, would you have tried to find a community sooner?
Yeah. And, you know, I tell people if I were to go back and do it all over again, I would do a lot of things different. Um, and one of the first things would be I would find a community right away, whether that be AA and just kind of get over those fears or frustrations I had with my father, uh, what happened with my dad, or just try to find someone to talk to.
Yeah.
Even, I mean, I did eventually wind up going to a therapist, but to find a therapist who focused on maybe alcohol or addiction would have been better than doing nothing. And
Right.
really in those early months, I did nothing. So yeah, I do have regrets about how I did it. I wish I did it different, but I can use what I've learned and I
Hmm.
can use my experience. You know, what I tell people now is I've done it both ways. I have done this with no recovery support,
Hmm.
and I've done it with an entire community of recovery support. And I will pick the community every single time. And, you know, in meetings now, I tell people like, learn from my mistake
Yeah.
and embrace the community because you don't have to do this alone.
Hmm.
And I wouldn't want to.
Yeah. And there's so many more options available now. If AA doesn't resonate with you, there are other communities. Do you want to talk a little bit about the community that you're involved in?
Yeah, I mean, the way I stumbled on community was completely by chance. The pandemic hit, and as parents, all our kids were sent home from school overnight. And all of a sudden now we are, you know, shaking our entire dynamic up at home around working, around homeschooling, around figuring out how to shelter in place with the entire family. And it was really stressful and scary. You know, I was 2 years sober at the time that happened. And I remember being like, how are we going to do this? And I can't even imagine people who were just at the beginning of their recovery journey when that happened, or maybe still just in the sober curious part of their journey. But my friend Emily Paulson put out a call to action on Instagram saying, who wants to support mothers right now? And I didn't know what this was. I didn't know what to expect, but I'm like, I do. Like I just knew whatever she was going to do, I wanted to be part of it. And that's when the Sober Mom Squad was born. It started out as just weekly meetings every Wednesday for anyone who identifies as a mom and is exploring alcohol-free living. And that was my first experience with a organized community. And I really just kind of jumped in with both feet. I started hosting meetings. I started connecting with other moms doing the same thing as I was. And I've been doing it ever since. I've been a host with Sober Mom Squad for 3.5 years. I run their book club. You know,
Mm.
I manage their. We still have the free weekly meetings every Wednesday. I still host those regularly. And some of my best friends have come out of this group. And I never would have found this. Well, this never would have even existed, uh, except for when the pandemic hit, because the pandemic forced everyone to go virtual.
Yeah.
And that's how Sober Mom Squad was born. That's how a lot of these communities have been born.
Yeah.
And even traditional recovery communities that went virtual.
Oh yeah.
Uh, and it has been such a gift for mothers. You know, I think one of the
Yeah.
other things I was like, well, there's no way I can go to these recovery meetings was I had two little kids at home. And the idea of trying to find somebody to now watch my kids, trying to just add that much more to my mental load just felt like,
Mm.
no, I'll just figure it out on my own. But
Mm.
now mothers, parents don't have to do that anymore. You can just log in from your house.
Yeah.
We have
Yeah.
moms who log in with the kids screaming in the background, or while they're breastfeeding, or while they're driving, chauffeuring from, one thing to the next. Um, it's, I tell people in our meetings all the time, I'm like, there's no better time to be sober than
Yeah.
right now.
Mhm.
And I know that firsthand because so much has changed just in the last couple years.
Yeah, it really has. I mean, I know, and the pandemic was really good for me in the sense that, I had moved, and when the pandemic hit, all my meetings from back home were now available online. So I was able to connect with all my people from home.
That's so
So
nice.
yeah, and people from all over the world. I love going to the Irish meetings. I can't understand them half the time, but they're so amazing.
That's so cool.
Yeah, I do Australia meetings, and I mean they're just, it's so cool now to just be able to, it just exploded with the online thing. So I love online meetings. I know some people don't like them. They want the in-person thing, but I love the idea that there are other options
Yeah.
that that are able to reach people who don't really resonate with traditional programs, right?
Right.
There's nothing wrong with that. There's everything right with that. So as long as, the basic elements are there, right? Love and support and
Hmm.
unity and compassion and empathy. And, so man, there's the power of just sharing, just having a safe place to be honest about like how hard it is to be a mom or a woman,
Yeah.
and or just be sober. So how do people find Sober Mom Squad if they want to join meetings?
Uh, they either find it through
Is there a website?
Google. There's a website, sobermomsquad.com. But they can find it on social media. They'll find it through me because I talk about it a lot on my social medias. Through uh, word of mouth. I mean, I think there's a lot of different things. Uh, Probably in the same way that they find any sort of sober community or recovery support.
Tell me a little bit about your online presence. I noticed you have a substantial following on Instagram. What is the tell me a little bit about like what your intention is behind it and how you help people with that. I'm sure you get a lot of people reaching out to you with that many
Yeah.
followers.
And I try to I'm not the owner of Sober Mom Squad. I'm just a host, but it's so close to my heart and it is my community that
Hmm.
I really, through my Instagram or Facebook or whatever it is, I do try to let people know like
Hmm.
this is the community I use, but there's so many out there because I want people to know there's different options. I want
Yeah.
people to know that recovery is going to look different for everybody because we're all so distinctly different people and we're
Yeah.
all driven by different things.
Hmm.
And what doesn't work for one person is going to work for another. So
Hmm.
I try to really encourage that message. My social media and my writing, my journey started in motherhood. I started out as a mom blogger.
Mm.
And I think the reason I gained a lot of traction is because I wrote how hard it was.
Yeah.
I was the only one, it seemed like, because most of the time you get all the beautiful messages about how, satisfying, deeply satisfying motherhood is. And I'm on the other side of it with like my hair everywhere. There's spit up on my shirt. And I'm like, this is really freaking hard. And I think that message just resonated with people and I grew a
Yeah.
following that way. I didn't even share my sober journey until I was 1 year sober. I started sharing what was going on because I thought to myself, these people know me as, this normal mom who just tells it like it is. If I can show them that this is also what a mom looks like with a drinking problem, which is to
Mm.
say, she looks like any other mom.
Yeah.
Maybe I can help break stigmas, or maybe I can help the other moms who also feel like they're stuck in the alcohol trap. So I
Yeah.
started to kind of dabble in sharing that story with this motherhood following. And people really felt connected to it, and people asked
Yeah.
me for more, and I got a book deal to talk about it. And so my passion, especially when Sober Mom Squad started, my passion just kind of built and grew around sobriety.
Hmm.
And I talk about it a lot on my social media. I think anybody who follows me there now, even the people who've started uh, before I'd even quit drinking, they still follow me, regardless of whether I'm talking about my sobriety or not, because I try to speak to the whys behind it. Why are mothers drinking more than ever? Why do we feel so overworked and undersupported? What can we do about this when we know that alcohol isn't serving us?
Hmm.
And I also did something that I think was pretty rare in the beginning. Now it's more common, but I was started to call out mommy wine culture.
Hmm.
Um, we see so many memes and TikToks of moms using that message as a joke,
It's
that
not funny.
they need alcohol to survive this, and you see the chaos in the background. And I was probably one of the earlier people to say that's not the message we need to be sending to moms who are struggling. What moms need is support. And when we are saying all we need is a little alcohol, we're really gaslighting the struggles at hand, because the issues mothers are coming across are way bigger than anything a glass of wine can fix.
Right.
So, the message, the story has absolutely evolved over the years. Uh, but I've been doing it for a long time. So I think anybody who's still there, who's been with me from the beginning, has seen just the, the ride of life, the wave of life. It rolls, and
Yeah.
my life has certainly rolled.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful for the people who are surfing the wave.
Yeah. Me too. Me too. Tell me a little bit about what life is like now. I mean, I just want to, as an aside, I feel like people need to buy this book because there's so much solution in it. That you talked one of the things that kept coming up for me was like the unequal distribution of work when it comes to childcare. And I know you've talked in the book about how to have those hard conversations about, everyone's time is equal and let's redistribute at least you can do it in your house. I mean, I think you post, I saw it, I don't know where I saw it, like something you posted about this guy, Ken, was like, are you still taking care of your kids, or are you
Mhm.
doing your career? Are you still taking care of your kids? And you're like, your comeback was so good. It's like, nobody asks this of men.
Right. It's such a double standard.
Yeah, the double standards drive me a little bit batty. But yeah, how did you handle some of those? How did you sort out, like, the distribution of the child care? Because that's like both people have jobs, and then you come home and then mom is supposed to handle the kids, and which is some bullshit. I mean, that
It's
never
the
happened in my house.
it's the traditional kind of approach. It's the approach I saw my parents take on growing up. It's certainly the approach my husband saw from his parents growing up. It was a generational thing. And now we are in this generation where more and more women are returning to work after having the baby, but the traditional expectations about who's in charge of what in the home front hasn't changed. And that's the disruption there. And that's where I started to realize, when I'm researching why are more women drinking than ever, that just kept coming up. You know, Mothers have always had it hard. In fact, mothers have been using alcohol and drugs to cope for a long time
A
too.
long time.
But why this huge increase in drinking in the past decade? And from my research, I just started uncovering that the mental load looks different now. It is this assumption that women are going to go back to work and break the glass ceilings, but they're still going to be chief caretaker and homemaker on the home front too. And it's unrealistic, and it really sets up women to fail on a massive level, with this traditional gender role expectations. So, when I think about women who fall in the alcohol trap, and why are we here, or especially the women who fell down that rabbit hole as a mother, uh, one of the first things I think of how we can help mothers is start, I mean, aside from working on your sobriety, what can you do to fix things on the home front? Well, you start with redistribution of labor at home
Yeah.
and getting to a more 50-50 system where you're both contributing to household labor, you're both contributing to childcare, and it's not just assumed mom's got it because she has the label of mom.
Yeah. And I think women, have we obviously we have a part to play, right? Like we have to say, like, be honest about like, hey, I'm tapped out. I heard Brene Brown talk about how she does it with her husband, where she's like, it's not 50-50. It's like they come home and she'll be like, hey, I got 20. And he'll be like, I got you. I'll do the 80. And they take turns. And I was like, wow, what a progressive way of thinking about that. Like some days are just better than others. And if you can't total 100, what's the game plan? How have you solved that? Like, please tell me that you guys worked it out and it's, and you're
Yes.
okay now.
And I'm still married.
Yeah, happily married. You worked it
Happily
out.
married. Yes, we had to work it out because I was in a place where I was like, if we don't work this out, I'm booking the first trip to Mexico. Like
Someone's
I
gonna
am
get
done.
hurt.
And I will tell you, it was the most enlightening conversation I've ever had with my husband. We've had to have the conversation many times.
I'm sure.
But I tell you, the first one, I'll never forget it because here I am, I'm telling him, our son was probably, I don't know, he was less than 6 months by this point. And I said, I am losing it. I'm drowning. I can't do this anymore. We have to change the way this is set up at home. And my husband says to me, I've been wanting to change this entire time. You keep pushing me away. And I realized I have put this thought in my head that a good mom does it all. A good mom is the one that reaches for her baby when he's crying. A good mom is going to be the one that puts him down and picks him up and does all the things because that's what I wanted in this idyllic look of what my motherhood experience would be like. And every time my husband did try to contribute, I snapped at him or I told him he was doing it wrong or I got passive aggressive. Like there were so many times where over and over again, I was pushing him away without even realizing that's what I
Yeah.
was doing.
Yeah.
And so for him, the conversation was like, I wish you had asked me sooner. But also
Oh.
you're going to have to let go of a little of the control. And I was
I'm
like,
laughing. I'm
okay,
laughing because I'm raising my hand. I was like, my poor husband wanted to do stuff, but it was like, you're not doing it my way. And I had a girlfriend.
exactly.
Yeah, I had a girlfriend be like, you're gonna have to let go. He has a way too. And oh, by the way, he's the dad. He's just as much a parent to this child as you are. So it was more
Yes.
about, him, he wanted to step. I just had to like let go. It was me. It was me the whole,
I know.
that awkward moment where you realize, hi, it's me. I'm the problem.
I'm the problem. It's so true. I mean,
Yeah.
and I never would have imagined that would be the conversation we had because it never even occurred to me.
I know, isn't that crazy?
But when
Yeah.
he told me that, and when I realized we were both on the same team,
Mm.
I got hope back.
Oh, he sounds like a good man.
He's a good man.
He's a good man. Yeah. What a relief. I mean, listen, we do the best that we can. And then sometimes, like drinking is I call it alcoholism, alcohol use disorder, whatever you want to call it. It's the best, worst thing that ever happened to me.
Mm,
It forced me to like look at my part and change some things I was afraid to change. Right. And
yeah.
then once I sort of lay down my armor, that's when all the magic was allowed to happen. And is it fair to say that that's your experience to some degree?
I would say getting sober forced me to fix the root issues at home, at
Yeah.
work. I mean, in spirituality, every
Ah,
single part of my life has changed
yeah.
as a result. And it's not like the problems weren't there before. They were. I just had numbed them out or I was distracting myself from them
There it
in a
is.
way that I can't when I'm sober.
There it is. Yeah. And listen, I have so much compassion. I mean, distraction is part of the human experience, especially in this day and age. I mean, I feel like the world is on, the world is a dumpster fire half the time. It's like the world has gone mad. So it's, yeah, we're under a lot of stress, and it's important that we find ways to, it's hard to stay, conscious and present. Like it's challenging. So, but there are ways. And I just want to say that I really appreciate how much solution you could call it. Lighten the load. Am I saying that right?
Mhm.
Lighten the
Yeah.
load. Yeah. I was like, am I crazy? No, that's what you said.
Yeah. No, we have a
I have all these
little
little tabs.
lighten the load section at the end of each chapter because we cover
Brilliant.
anxiety, we cover the mental load, we cover herd mentality. But, I throw a lot of problems out there in the book, like why we do this and why we're drinking. But
Hmm.
I try to counter them with, okay, but what do I do about it?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I feel like it, to some degree, everybody's very familiar with the problem. And so the solution is what's really important. And I just kind of want to call out something that you have at the end of your book, because it's something, me and my friends say all the time. It's like, nobody cares. Nobody cares. We
Who
care.
cares? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. You have it in your book as who cares, page 191. I just love this whole, realization that and I feel like once you're sober and you have, like, people love us, but they don't, we care, but we don't care. We don't care that what
Right.
you used to do, or it's, the things that we struggle with. It's like, it doesn't mean that we're bad people. We're just having a hard time or having a human experience. And it's
I
like, don't take
think
yourself so seriously.
when you quit drinking, you realize that like, you're not the center of everybody else's story.
Yeah, nobody cares.
And it's a good thing.
Yeah. We're all thinking the same thing. What about me?
Yeah, exactly.
We're all thinking the same thing. So funny. Well, I could talk to you all day, and I got to turn you loose. But I just want to say thank you for writing this book, and continue on your quest of beating the drum about mommy wine culture, because we need to meet people where they're at. And I think that there are so many women out there who secretly know something is off and they don't know what. And to receive the message of, it's not about the wine, like, where is this coming from? You're not alone.
Yeah.
You don't have to do it this way anymore. I mean, that is the message that needs to be shouted from the rooftop. So thank you so much for the courage that it took, and the persistence and the hard work to write this book.
Thank you. And thank you for having me on and for this just really nice conversation with somebody who gets it.
I do, girlfriend. I certainly do. Well, listen, where if people want to find you on social media, where's the best place for them to find you?
My handle is the Ultimate Mom Challenge on Facebook and Instagram. And that's the best way to find me.
Awesome. Well, keep up the great work. It was so nice to be with you today. And I look forward to speaking to you again in the future.
All right. Thank you.